There's Always a Lyric is sponsored by Lotus 823. At Lotus 823, your goals are our goals. We help consumer tech, home, and lifestyle brands gain visibility, drive relevant traffic, and increase sales through customized public relations and marketing strategies. Want to learn more? Head over to lotus823.com or get in touch at biz@lotus823.com today.
Welcome to another episode of There's Always a Lyric. I'm your host, David Hernandez. This is brought to you by Lotus 823. And in full disclosure, I'm a managing partner and founder, co-founder at Lotus 823. And today we have not only a great executive, great colleague, great friend, but a really wonderful human being who I'm very proud to say I know and have been friends with almost the entire time the agency has been open for the last 14 years. And before we get started, I just want to give a little background on Mark Beal. He's a 30-year marketer. Mark is a Rutgers University professor, author, and keynote speaker, and he spent the first 30 years of his career creating integrated marketing campaigns for leading brands around high-profile sports and entertainment properties, including the Olympics, Super Bowl halftime show, and the Rolling Stones. Lots of cool factor there. Mark has authored 8 books, including 4 books focused on Generation Z, which we will be talking about today. And Mark's most recent book, published earlier this year, is titled Win the Job and Thrive in a Multi-Generational Workplace. And there's the book. Welcome, Mark Beal.
Thank you, David. Great to be on here. I see on LinkedIn every time you do interviews. I said, I've got to get on this show somehow. I love it.
Thank you. And I figured, I mean, there's a lot to cover here. So I want to just jump into where we are right now. Can you tell me a little bit about the present, which is very different from everything that led to the present?
Yeah, it is, absolutely. So my main focus, my primary focus now is to collaborate and connect with students at the undergraduate and graduate levels at Rutgers University, mostly juniors, seniors, and graduate students, a few sophomores as well. I don't teach entry-level courses. I teach 300, 400 level and graduate courses in public relations and integrated marketing. And so as part of that, I don't just get to connect and collaborate with them in the classroom moment we're discussing, but it's really about their careers and how to get to where they want to go. And so I spend an incredible amount of time, 7 days a week, helping them with everything from resumes to connecting them with folks like you in the industry, to helping them prep for job interviews, helping them get job interviews. So that's not part of my pay job. That's not part of my, that's kind of my purpose in life now. So I feel like this is my purpose now, is helping the next generation with their career aspirations and anything that is involved in that. And that's something that happens every day of the week. I just finished a few minutes ago helping a student secure a fall internship with a major media company that she really wants. And so I've already reached out to the main decision maker there and hope that my call will at least help her get an interview, and who knows, maybe go further than that. So yeah, so that's the focus now, is those courses at Rutgers, and then really helping the students they'll get from college to career.
And that's interesting, because there's a through line there between that and your past, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Do you want to maybe, while we're still on the present, one of the things that you've been hyper focused on in your last few books and I can say this with glee, as published author Mark Beal, is Generation Z, and you've dug a real deep trench in the understanding, impact, et cetera, of Gen Z, not only currently, but what it's going to look like as Gen Z moves into the workforce, moves into positions of power.
Yeah. So to your point, that is the bridge. So for the first 30 years, as you mentioned in my career, I worked primarily at one agency, Taylor in New York, for those 30 years.
Yeah.
For half of that time, I was one of the managing partners. And as you know very well, 2005, 2010, 2015, most of those RFPs or the assignment briefs you receive from clients were about millennials. How do we engage millennials? How do we create relationships with millennials? And in 2017, I was teaching a course. I was still just what they call an adjunct professor. I was teaching one course at Rutgers, and as I drove back to the office, a light bulb went off in my head. And I said, millennials are the focus, even in 2017, but come 2024, 25, 26, 27, Gen Z will become the focus for most companies, most brands, both on the marketing, communication side, but also on the recruit and retain side, on the employer side. And so I just started immersing myself in Gen Z. Every morning I kind of have the same routine, early 5 a.m., 5:30, 6 a.m. I just gather the latest studies, the latest surveys, the latest articles, and I have a massive file that you can't see here to my side that I just gather all this and I file it away and use it for books, use it for articles I write, use it for speeches I deliver. But then I'm a really lucky guy because I'm in a classroom a couple days a week with Gen Zers. So I'm not just reading this, I'm then like testing it as I go into the classroom and say, so what do you think of this? Or what do you think of this study? Or, this latest report came out about what you're doing on your phones. Let's go through it and let's get your reactions. And if they're nodding their head and agreeing, then I'm like, okay, well, this study or this survey or this article is right on target because these Gen Zers who are my classroom ages 19, 20, 21, 22, they're agreeing with that. So I have that real-time kind of think tank, I guess we could call it.
Well, yeah.
I could walk into a classroom any day and just say, hey, so what do you think about this campaign that XYZ branch launched this week? Or what about this initiative? And they are eager to give me their insights, their feedback, and what they think is working and not working when it comes to engaging Gen Z.
That's so interesting because it's really you even though you're in academia, you're moving past the academic and having discussions that are essentially man on the street discussions with the actual audience. And to that point, I would love to, if you can give us, at least in broad terms, how they view consumer marketing and what resonates with them as an audience, as potential customers or prospects of these consumer brands. For the folks that are listening in, and we've got people on both sides of either agency life and also in the brands and manufacturers that listen to this. What do you see, at least in broad strokes?
Absolutely. I think there's kind of a two-part to it. First is the content and the channels, right? And I say this all the time, so I sound like a broken record, but this generation doesn't know what the 6 o'clock news is. This generation doesn't know what Good Morning America is. They don't know what ABC, CBS, and NBC are. They don't consume content through traditional channels like you and I did, right, growing up. That's just part of our behavior, part of how we tune into those things. They consume a lot of content, a lot of information, including branded content, but they're doing it on their channels. What I call the big three, or TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, are the big three for them. And there's, of course, other channels as well. But the first thing is, as a marketer, you need to engage them where they're at. And I know that's easy to say and easy to understand. Oh, that makes sense, right? But they're not consuming traditional channels. I'll give you a couple of quick examples. If I have 20, 25 Gen Zers in a room, and the first question I usually just ask is, hey, tell me a brand that's effectively engaging you right now, is reaching you, is getting through to you. First one all the time, Duolingo. They make learning language fun on the channels that I consume. So they're producing content that is fun. I'm also learning, but I'm having fun learning, but they're doing it on those channels that I consume, right? They're doing it across TikTok and other channels. And so that's a brand that I've done that several times or many times with Gen Zers. And Duolingo, if it's not the first brand they say, it's the second brand or third, but usually it's the very first one. And what I always say is we've had lots of learning language platforms and businesses out there for years, but this is one that's actually resonating with this generation for those reasons. They're creating content that's engaging, that's fun, but it's on the channels that they consume. And so that's a big part of it. Channels and content, huge part of it, actually. Mm-hmm. And then I'd say the other piece of the puzzle is just, Gen Z will tell you, we typically are engaged by brands that are genuine, that are authentic, that maybe have a purpose other than just simply selling me something. So that's kind of another piece of it too, besides the content and the channels, but brands that seem to have a genuine interest in engaging me and communicating with me and connecting with me and those kinds of things. And so there are some brands out there that are doing that through nationwide Gen Z incubators. Target was the first ever brand in 2018, and they've continued it. They have a nationwide Gen Z incubator where every year they basically issue an invitation to Gen Z or say, hey, we want to open up the boardroom to you. We want to connect and collaborate on your great ideas for the future. So it's not an internship. It's not a job. It's truly a collaboration. They call it an incubator. Converse has the same. The NHL has the same. And so they're going from traditional push marketing and promotions to engaging this generation and inviting them in and saying, what can we do together? And so, again, that's just another piece of it. But there's that nuance of traditional marketing, traditional promotion, traditional advertising, which is not going away, by the way, to how do we kind of engage this generation? How do we get them in the conversation? How do we connect with them and have maybe a shared purpose as opposed to just pushing messages and content out? Yeah, there's a great headline. Hard to believe it's 2019 already that the article ran, but Ad Age had a great article, a great headline that I still use to this day. Gen Z doesn't want to buy your brand; they want to join your brand. Powerful headline, by the way. Not easy for any brand. Not easy. Although Duolingo will probably tell you that's real easy, but they're joining our brand.
Right.
But the point is, they don't want just a transactional relationship. They actually want a relationship, a collaboration, a connection. And so that was an article that I still use in all my keynote speeches. They don't want to buy your brand. They want to actually join your brand. And so as a brand, not easy to do, by the way, as a brand, you have to, okay, well, how do we even bring that to life? And so Rick Gomez, who was the chief marketing officer of Target, he's got a fancier title now, but he said, we have to leverage the power of our brand Target and connect in a meaningful and purposeful way with this new generation and bring their great ideas for the future to life, something along those lines. But that was how he and the team there created their incubator, which is now going on maybe year 6 or year 7, and has really led to a lot of insights around products, content, the user experience, community initiatives, a whole bunch of things. And that's been a great approach to engaging Gen Z.
Can you tell the audience a little bit about your origin story and how you got into PR, communications, and marketing, and eventually where you are now?
Yeah, I was always, even at a young age, I was some guys who I went to college with way back when who are now anchors on national television. We called ourselves media junkies. We loved media. We actually loved reading newspapers when we were in high school. We loved listening to radio. We loved watching TV. So we just loved media. Now in those days, I don't want to date myself, but I'll just say the mid 80s. Yeah. There was no TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, right? The channels you consume content were the traditional media channels. And so, I still remember sophomore year of high school, my mom said, "Hey, here's an ad for the local weekly newspaper. They need a sports editor. Why don't you go apply?" I'm like, "Well, they're not going to hire some sophomore in high school." Well, I guess I was the only one to apply because they hired me. And so I became the sports editor of a weekly newspaper out of Belmar, New Jersey. And I wrote the articles, I edited the articles, I went in and did the layout every Friday, which I didn't know anything about layout and design. And so that was great. And so I did that. And by senior year, I was writing for the Asbury Park Press. Senior year of high school, I was writing for the Asbury Park Press, just as a stringer. Hey, can you go cover this event? Go cover this 5K run, whatever it might be. So I was doing all those things. And as I went to college at Rutgers, continued with the radio station, but I started dipping my toe into the PR and communication side. I went over to the athletic department and said, "Hey, is there any opportunity for me to work in communications?" And so they gave me a few teams where I became, in essence, the PR, person for men's lacrosse and some other sports.
Your first gig.
Yeah. And then really it was, I always go back to this. To me, the summer of '88 was my summer. That was the summer that I lived at Rutgers, got on a train every morning at, 7 o'clock, and I went into a PR agency every day. That was kind of a sports and entertainment PR agency. And after day one, I left there and like, this is what I want to do. I don't want to report the news. I want to create the news. I want to be involved in storytelling. And I did that every day. And then as soon as I got done around 5:30-ish every day as an intern, I sprinted to 30 Rock. And I produced one of the first ever major sports radio shows every night from 7 to midnight. Got done at 12:01, raced to Penn Station, caught a 12:35 train back to New Brunswick, took a nap and did it again the next day. But it was that summer where I said, okay, I love media. I actually want to be on this side and I want to get into this thing they call public relations. And so that was it. That was the key, was that internship, summer of '88, that flipped everything. And then, graduated from Rutgers. First job was at Fordham University in kind of their in their athletic department and communication. And 9 or 10 months later, I was at an agency and I stayed there for 30 years.
There had to have been moments where you faced some kind of failure or some kind of change. And I think I ask this question all the time in the podcast. I think it's an important question because I think it helps a lot of people understand, that they're not alone when they fail. Sure. And that actually that is part of the learning process. That's where you do some of your best learning. Do you have something you can share with the audience?
Oh yeah, I've got one that I've been sharing a lot lately, and it's just very relevant, meaningful, and even timely now. So as a very young executive in the early '90s, very young. I mean, I was like carrying bags for people. They said, "Hey, we want you to be part of our new business team," and new business well. Why don't you be part of our new business team? We're going to go fly to Florida. We're going to try to win. I don't want to get too much into the name, so I won't say much now. We want to, be, wow, I mean, I'm a couple of years out of college. I want to be part of the team. I'm going to go with, at that time, the head of the agency and other leaders. And I didn't know anything, right? What do I know? I'm just there, like I said, probably carrying their bags, and I guess I'm going to say something, right? So I was too new and too young to really know any better. Well, we get down to Florida, and we walk in the room, and the CEO of the company we're presenting to and others are there, and he simply asked one question. Did you test drive my product? Not just to the group. And no. He says, you can leave now. We don't need you to present. And that stuck with me forever, because eventually I became the leader of the new business efforts at our agency 8, 9, 10 years later. And I ended up leading that charge for 20 years. And that lesson of not preparing properly, not preparing the right way, not doing your research, not test drive. When I say test driving, I mean, test driving could be going to a restaurant and trying their food. It could be, drinking their drink. It could be driving it could be anything. Test driving just means trying the product out.
Yeah.
I learned that. And so starting when I really started leading the new business efforts in the early 2000s, we test drove everything, and it led to winning everything. And so I will name some names here, but when we presented for the Taco Bell business against a bunch of other agencies for the 2 or 3 weeks, because as you know, you only have about 2 or 3 weeks, we spent as much time as you could sitting in as many Taco Bells, eating the food, talking to the front, talking to the staff on the counter, talking to the managers, picking up the lingo and lexicon, and weaving all that into the presentation. And when we went and presented, and we say, hey, we visited 40 of your locations over the past 3 weeks, and here's what we learned. Just blew their mind out, because not that agencies don't do that, because I think some agencies do, but I think most probably don't. And the insights you get from that, you can't buy, you can't find, you can't Google. These are things you're picking up by just being there and being part of that. So whether it was doing that at Taco Bell, or when we went and spent quality time at Mercedes-Benz dealerships and literally test drove vehicles
for real,
and won their business, by the way. And then the great news is, fast forward almost, I don't know if it was 20, we'll say 20 years later, it may not be, but 20 years later, that company that, so to speak, kicked us out of the door back in the early 90s, well, they'd gone through new ownership and new management, all those things. And they came calling again. I guess they didn't remember who we were back then, because there was all. And I said, we're going to win this thing. And sure enough, we won it. But we made sure we test drove. We went into their dealerships. We went into their shops. We met with their consumers. We met with the fan. And that was a key lesson in business, was because, as you know better than anyone, new business is such a critical part of, especially agency world. Yeah. I just presented my students last week, and I said there's 2 key pieces to agency life. One is client services and serving your client at such a high level that at the end of the year they got to bring you back, and they're bringing you back at even a bigger role. And the other is proactively going out and securing new business, and then of course keeping that business. And so that was a lesson learned, like I said, when I was 2-3 years into my career, and then it paid off for 20 plus years, because the approach was, let's immerse ourselves in this brand or this company, and try, not that you can, but try to understand it as well as the executives who actually work there 24/7. It paid off time after time after time after time again, because of that one incident back in the early 90s, which when I look back, as you said, great things came from that lesson.
It was the best lesson ever.
Best lesson. For me, it was best because, again, I was new in I was relatively young in my career. Maybe for others who had been in their career, it wasn't as good. But for me, it was the best thing ever, because never made that mistake twice.
Right. It was like, right. Do your homework. Do your homework.
Do your homework.
Don't go in cold.
And so even today, as my students prepare for their job interviews as they graduate, I basically say the same thing. Immerse yourself in this company, this agency, this brand, whatever it is. Understand them, learn them, read every quarterly report you can find. And so it's the same approach in attempting to win the job.
In talking about kind of getting back to the present and talking to your students and teaching, and what that brings to your life, both professionally and personally. Sure. What do you find? I guess the question I want to ask is not so much what do you find, but how do you see Gen Z in total different from previous generations? Even millennials who are, there's a close barrier there between sort of the youngest part of the millennial set and the oldest part of the generation. right? There's always that little kind of.
I call them Zillennials. Yes. Zillennials. They are my Zillennials.
Okay, I'm stealing that.
They would be 28, 29-year-olds right now. The oldest Gen Zers turned 27 this year. They're no longer just in school anymore. I think a lot of people are shocked when they hear that. They're now, some of them are 2, 3, 4 years into their career. And quickly following up, but we're not going to go there today, but we will in about 5 years, is Gen Alpha. Gen Alpha right now is age 0 to 11. Dove recently came out with a campaign all focused on Gen Alpha. So all of a sudden we've got major brands already starting to engage Gen Alpha or attempting to engage Gen Alpha. So there's a few themes. I'll just throw out a couple of them. And again, when I say this, I'm comparing them. I point at myself. So when I say older generations, I'm pointing at myself. I'm not talking about anyone else out there. Right. But for Gen Z, or for my generation, and I think you'll agree with this one, we lived to work. We lived to go to work 7 days a week. And that was like a sole focus. I can tell you that right now. I mean, I live to work. Gen Z doesn't live to work. They work to live. They work so that they can actually afford travel, adventure, experiences. Work is not the epicenter of their life. Life is the epicenter. So they're not living to go to work every day and basically put in 14, 15, 16, 17 hours a day. They are working so they can actually travel and experience life and see things like that. So it's a slight nuance, right? But what I say all the time is, when pre-2020, when we used to go into an office, and I got to be careful how I say this, but sometimes you measured the value someone brought by how many hours they were in the office, not by what they did in the hours they were there. And so
true.
Because someone showed up at 8 a.m. and left at 8 p.m., they got the gold star. Well, what did they do in the 12 hours? And so the kind of the flip on that is Gen Z works smarter, not harder. And I think generations like us, we focused more on working harder, not smarter per se. So what I mean by that is Gen Z, with their ability to leverage and utilize technology and the latest platforms, they can figure out ways to kind of get to the finish line a little bit quicker on what's something that maybe for me would take forever to figure out. And so the idea of working smarter, not harder. There's a great quote from the former CMO of MTV, but I use it all the time and I always give her credit. But Gen Z is the first generation that learned to swipe before they wiped. They've had technology in their hands since age 1, 2, and 3. They embrace technology. So you guys, know this, but like right now, a lot of my Gen Zers will come back and they'll guest lecture and they'll say, yeah, I'm using Slack more than ever now, right? We're not using email as much because Slack, we can, in more timely manner, we can communicate, we can get responses, we can get things done quicker. And so, I mean, that's a small example, but the point is, like, email to them is like a dinosaur. Where Slack is like, all right, I need an answer, I need it now. Client, what do you got? Great, let's keep going, and that. So I think there's that whole thing of, again, smarter, not harder.
What advice can you share? I mean, you've got lots of young professionals right in front of you, right? Every day. Yeah. If you had like that one thing that you go, look, you maybe not like the class, you may not like me, but I just want to share one thing with you that I think can make a difference.
It's if I can only share one, I can tell you the one is, but there's actually, on the first day of class and the last day of class, I share 4 bits of advice. And I just did it the other day because we finished.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
So the first is just, what do you love? Pursue your passions. You love music like you do. You love sports. You love beauty. You love fashion. Pursue a career in that area because you'll never feel like you worked a day in your life, right? So what are your passions? We all love something, right? Or maybe more than one thing, but we must all love something that we just have a passion about, right? Travel, music, sports, entertainment, whatever it might be. So first is pursue your passions. 2, consistently be curious and ask questions. I bring in almost 60 guest lecturers a semester, nearly 60. If all of a sudden, just the other 2 days ago, I had an executive from Warner Brothers in my classroom who was a student of mine 5, 6 years ago. You get the chance to talk to someone from Warner Brothers, I would be, after the class is done, I would try to see if he'd go grab a cup of coffee. I'd sit him down for an hour, right? I mean, how often do you get that chance? So, curious about how did he get to where he is? How did, lessons, the same kind of questions you're asking. The third thing is I just say, dream big, capital BIG. Don't settle for just don't settle, right? Dream big, 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 big. And then I usually share a few examples of some of my former students who are now in big time positions. And then the last is anything is possible. Anything is possible. You can really go out and achieve anything you want. You can have any position you want. You can launch your own company, whatever you want to do. And so on day one and the last day, those are the 4 bits of advice I give them all. I'll probably say the same thing tonight when I go speak to a bunch of students. The other thing I'll say tonight, I'll actually, before I get into those, and I will deliver those 4 tonight, by the way, because I'm speaking to students who have been are being inducted to a National Honor Society at Rutgers. But before I say that, I will say it not once but twice. But I will say, if you can see them, you can be them. And I'll repeat that. And what I mean is, if you see someone who's in a role that you want to be, there is nothing stopping you from having that same role, that same position. So I'll start with that, and then I'll go into these 4 pieces of advice.
That's wonderful. Those are keepers.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I have the summational question of the podcast, the last question, and you know what's coming. So
yes,
it's the title.
It's probably going to tie in nicely to everything I just discussed.
So Mark Beal, if there's one song title or a lyric that captures you or your view on life, your journey, what would it be?
Well, I know you are Mr. Music, but most of my songwriting, those who I've been inspired by were, of course, I grew up in the 70s, so I love Tom Petty and Bob Seger and Jackson Brown and Glenn Frey and all those guys. But I'm not going to give you one of those. I listen a lot now. In fact, I just finished a long run and I just listen to these guys the whole time I run. I listen to them all the time, and some people know them, some people don't, but they're really big in the country scene in Nashville right now. But they're called Old Dominion. It's basically 4 kind of guys who were songwriters who one day said, well, what are we just writing the songs? Let's go perform them. And so I've seen them in concert many, many times, and I really can't get enough of their songwriting and their lyrics. And so in one of their songs, the lyric is, chase after the dream, don't chase after the money. And I just told my students, I used the same lyric in class the other night. I said, you will make more money than you could ever imagine. And I mean that. They will make more money in their lifetime than they can ever imagine. But do it in something, again, a passion, an area that you love, an interest in, right? Instead of just, well, this job's going to give me 5,000 more when I graduate than this one, so I'm going to take this job, right? So Monday night, I said that. I said, chase after the dream, don't chase after the money, because in chasing the dream or pursuing the dream, great things will result. I think the money will ultimately be there, but more importantly, you'll be working in an area that you love, that you have a passion for, as we said earlier. It could be politics, it could be sports, it could be music, it could be entertainment, it could be anything. Right. So that's I used that on, I think, Monday night, so I wanted to use it again today.
That is a really, really great line. And that was a surprise. What I love about this podcast is I get such great surprises from the folks that I get on here, from my guests. But that is really wonderful. And I hear what you're saying, Mark. That is the key, is finding something that you truly care about, that you have a passion for, like you said.
Yeah. And great things will result. Great things will result, I promise.
Right. It will just come because you're pouring yourself into it.
Exactly. Because you love what you're doing.
Right. You love what you're doing. And on that note, I want to say thank you for joining us today. This was an important one for me. I really wanted to get you on here, and I know how busy you are. So again, thanks for making the time for us today.
Thank you, David. I appreciate it. This is great. You're a great interviewer, so thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.